right, we'll give everyone another minute or two to file in here, settle down and grab a cup of coffee. All right, well, we seem to have a quorum, so we can get started. So first of all, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's SAMPS webinar. As you know, this is an overview of Google Ads and Google Analytics. Joining me on the line is Jeff Kotran. We'll get to some introductions here in just a second. First and foremost, the Q&A is open. At any point, you can type a question. We will see that, hopefully get to it either in real time or at the end of this presentation. If we don't, we will have those archived and we will swing back with you offline. So the agenda today, we're going to begin with an overview of Google Ads and Google Analytics, where they sit in the digital marketing and Google ecosystem, and some of their use cases. We'll look at basic navigation, some of the very top line things that you can do in the two applications. We'll talk with Jeff about how the data is used in the real world, particularly on the content side of things. And then we'll dive into some upcoming and emerging changes in the Googleverse, which are going to affect everyone on this call, certainly everyone's company on this call. Finally, we'll take a look at what this all means specifically in the life sciences space. So obviously, I am Adam Smartschan on the left. Titularly, I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Altitude Marketing, an agency in Pennsylvania. Joining me is Jeff Kotran. He is our Director of Content Marketing at Altitude. As far as our roles here today, I'm very much the technical user of Google Ads and Google Analytics. I dive into that side. Jeff is much more the business user of Google Analytics. It's my team that is ultimately responsible for getting his team the insights that they need to deliver solutions in the life sciences and for the rest of our client base. So that's the dichotomy that we'll be playing with here today. You'll hear both perspectives. So I want to begin with a look at the Google ecosystem in general. This has changed quite a bit and will continue to change quite a bit in the last few years and in the coming years. This used to be much more spread out. But what we have now really is three-pronged as we look at it today. Google Ads and Google Analytics are Google's entry-level offerings. So Google Ads manages, as we'll see, everything from search ads that you see when you Google something, to many of the display ads that you see around the internet, to advertising in places like YouTube and Google Shopping. Google Analytics is obviously Google's entry-level web analytics platform. I would bet that almost every single person on this call has that installed on their website. I'd be surprised if it's more than a few percent who don't. It is essentially universal, and there is a pun intended there that we'll get to in a little bit. Their more advanced solutions now live in what's called the Google Marketing Platform. This is relatively rare, certainly at the SMB side, even in the enterprise. Google Marketing Platform carries a 7-figure annual price tag. It's really meant for websites with more than about 10 million monthly hits. Typically, we see it deployed at over $1 million a month on the e-commerce side. So you need to be big to have Google Marketing Platform running. If anyone here is familiar with the old days, that's essentially a combination of Google's old 360 enterprise platform and DoubleClick. But that's really just trivia now. It's all the Google Marketing Platform. We're not going to dive into that today. Instead, we are talking about Google Ads and Google Analytics at the top line. So again, Google Ads 101. Let's break down exactly what we're talking about here. Now, I don't want anyone to think that they're going to get a click-by-click lesson in either of these platforms. We only have an hour to cover both, as well as some changes that are coming in the market. Now, Google offers some really good tactical training and strategic training as well on what they call Skill Shop. That's easily found. If you simply Google Skill Shop, you'll see a slew of courses in everything from the analytics side to display advertising to search advertising. Each piece of curriculum is 6 to 10 hours long, which is why we can't cover it all in an hour. I do want to give you the top line, though, to make sure that we're all speaking the same language as we move into what's coming next in and around the Googleverse. So as I noted, Google Ads is Google's entry-level digital advertising platform. It's the first digital advertising platform that most marketers learn and most marketers use, the possible exception of Facebook, but that's more B2C than anything else. As I noted before, Google Ads allows you to do search advertising, which is, of course, the little ads that show up when someone searches something on Google. Display advertising across a vast network, even getting into apps on mobile phones. It allows for remarketing. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Remarketing at the very top line is when you go to a website and you see an ad for that site or that product later. That's often served up through Google. It allows for Google Shopping, which is, of course, the things that show at the top of the screen when you search for a particular product. It allows for video advertising, primarily on YouTube. All of this runs through the same interface. The targeting capabilities on Google Ads are relatively rudimentary compared to what you would get in, say, Google Marketing Platform or a more robust programmatic platform, which is really your step up here. But you do have some really nice stuff. Everything that Google knows about you, your location, a lot of your behavior, a lot of your proclivities, a lot of your intent, right? If you're looking around at a lot of sites specifically for luxury cars, you might have your data sold to BMW. Is it fantastic in terms of intent data for business purchases and technical purchases, particularly in a field like this? Not necessarily, but there are ways to make it work, and we'll get into those. Everything in Google Ads works in what are called bids. So when someone goes to a web page and there's an open spot for a display ad, Google holds an auction very rapidly. And this is a dramatic oversimplification, but ultimately the ad or the product that Google thinks is going to deliver it the most revenue, so the highest bid and the best chance of a click from a user, is what serves. Now we can go for hours about ad strategy and bid strategy and quality score and user experience, but that's the top line. Typically, you're going to pay on a CPC or cost per click basis in Google Ads. So when someone clicks, you pay. When someone doesn't click, you don't. Though you can work on what's called a CPM model, where you pay a flat fee for every 1,000 impressions. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Again, if you want to dive deep into the weeds on those, Skill Shop it will take you through everything around bid strategy, everything around pricing, everything around what Google Ads is actually going to cost you. You can dive in there if you like. But for now, we can suffice by saying usually you're paying on a CPC model. And everything in Google Ads is structured in a 3-tier system where you have campaigns. That could be a set of ads. That could be a specific platform or type of ad. You then have ad groups where if you're bidding on keywords, your keywords work in. So I want to show this set of ads for this set of keywords or this keyword in particular. And finally, there's the ad itself, which is either a piece of creative, an image, it could be an animated GIF in a display situation. It could be a video. What we're really going to hit on, though, today is the search ad, the text primarily that shows up when you do a search in Google. So keep that in the back of your mind as we dive a little bit more into the Google ad interface here. Campaign, ad group, ad. To give an overview at the 30,000 foot level, this is a Google ad dashboard. Right? This is what you get when you log into your account. And you can see some of what I just put out there listed here. Right? We have our campaigns, we have our ad groups on the left-hand side. Our ads are below that. Then you had your keywords and your audiences and demographics. And this is all the targeting, again, that you can learn about on Skillshop, or you can frankly trust your marketing team to do for you if you're so inclined. And the last piece before we dive into some real world use cases on the Google Ads side are the core metrics. These are the things that Jeff's team is ultimately looking at, and other content teams are ultimately looking at to see efficacy, to see how we're doing. It's a 4-tier structure, right? We look at impressions. Is our creative being seen? We look at click-through rate, or CTR. Is it resonating with people? Are they engaging with it? We look at conversions. Are we driving real engagement when someone comes to our site or comes to our landing page? Are they taking the action that we want? And then we look at CPA, or cost per acquisition. And some people call this CPL, or cost per lead. This is the amount that we're spending for each conversion. Is that acceptable? Right? This all is your big picture set of metrics in Google Ads. Now, again, very oversimplified. We only have an hour here to go through 2 platforms and a lot of changes. But this is where I would want to ask Jeff to weigh in about how we tell a story for a technical, in our case, clients, but in the case of the people on this call, a technical company. How do we differentiate ourselves, and how do we avoid, because again, remember, we pay for the click, getting bad clicks, right? How do we avoid consumers coming through because they're looking for similar words and wasting our budget? How do we stand out from the crowd, particularly in search ads?
So great question. And thank you, Adam. I think, where we start usually is keywords. Keywords are the currency, if you will, for the Google algorithm, and for people that go to Google to ask it questions. Consider the fact that about every second, roughly around 40,000 people search for something on Google. And they ask it a variety of questions, any kind of question you can think of, but that's where they go. And I think it's something like almost half of all product searches start on Google. Right now, the other half is on Amazon, and they've kind of flip-flopped over the years. But certainly for B2B, for businesses that are selling to other businesses, Google's going to be the primary place people go to start a search that will result in some kind of transaction. It might be a free trial, it might be a demo, it might be a sales call, it could be anything along those lines, but it's going to start on Google. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how people search for it, how they think about it, what words they use, how they describe it, how they define it. And some of the tools Adam is talking about here, in addition to some others, we use those to kind of zero in on the answer to that, the answer being how people define something. And it's usually made manifest in a list of keywords. And that list helps us, kind of figure out what direction we want to go in with something like search ads. So if we want to write some search ads, we know which keywords to use. But it also helps us avoid what Adam mentioned there, which is unqualified clicks, attention from somebody that is not your customer, somebody that might click on your ad and will cost you that $1 or $2 or $3 per click, and you can't help them. They're not your potential buyer. And we see that a lot in certain industries. And that's really where keywords play a major role, and where not just what I'll call basic or broad keyword terms, where you just have like the word itself, but also more specific, what we call long tail keywords, which are basically just that initial keyword with some context, with some extra words thrown in that help the Google algorithm understand exactly what you're talking about. So that's how we figure it out in the beginning. And then as far as differentiating your brand, because let's say you're in an industry and you've got I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 15 competitors, and they all are going after the same keywords. They're all going after the same audience. At the end of the day, what's going to differentiate you is going to be number one, you're creative. Creative is one of the last unfair advantages, I believe it's been said, that businesses have. That's the reason why maybe you drink Coke more than Pepsi. It's the reason why maybe you're at least aware of Geico more than State Farm, or maybe Progressive. Creative is really the thing that's going to differentiate these brands from one another. So creative is one piece of it, but the offer is another. What are you offering that's of value to that audience, that search audience? And there's a variety of offers, certainly, that we've helped our clients come up with or consider. But it could be anything from starting a free trial if it's software, a demo if it's software. It could be a free assessment of some kind if your offering is more of a consulting type of offering. But whatever it is, we want to make sure that it's unique and that it's of value. And then that coupled with good creative, which is a bit of a loaded term, an abstract term, but coupled with coupled with good creative, then those two things tend to stand out more. They tend to get attention more. They tend to do the things that Adam is talking about here, resonate, drive engagement, and actually convert people.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff. So the other side of what we're looking at here today in the Googleverse is Google Analytics. As we noted before, this is Google's entry-level web analytics platform, though I don't want to give the impression in any way, shape, or form that entry-level means easy. Google Analytics is notoriously difficult to use when you're first getting started. If you want to get the most out of it, again, I highly recommend starting with some of the training that they offer. The curriculum is good, it's comprehensive, and you can pick up a certification for your LinkedIn as well, which is always good. Now, it's important to note as well that Google Analytics in its current form tracks largely hits. So this is someone coming to your website. This is someone viewing a page on your site. This is someone taking an action, which we can track as what's called an event. And then ultimately, this is about conversions, right? Someone taking the action that you want them to take for filling a goal. What Google Analytics does not do, and actively does not do, is track individual user data, or PII. Google Analytics is not a tool that will help you identify the users on your website. It's not going to say Jim from insert company here or insert lab there was on your site. You can know geographically where someone is, but that's about it. Google is very sensitive, and increasingly so about that for obvious reasons in our current privacy culture. There are tools that can do that to varying degrees of efficacy, but Google Analytics is going to give you a top-line view. So as we look at it here, again, this is the homepage. You can dive in here for hours upon hours. What you get at the very, very top line is, so currently this is users. This is users daily right here in the middle. You can see that the trend line, in this case, in the sample data we used, it's down 15% period over period. So 30 days versus the previous 30 days. We can see here this sample data set is set up as an e-commerce site. Google Analytics can tie into an e-commerce system, track revenue, track average purchase, give you all of the rich stuff you want there. Conversion rate is simply the percentage of users who are taking the action that we want them to take, or one of the actions we want them to take. In the case of e-commerce, it's almost always a purchase. In the case of a more traditional B2B site, it's almost always a form completion. But you can build business rules till the cows come home to do your Google Analytics goals the way you want. And sessions is slightly different than users. Sessions is obviously times people are on your site as opposed to the number of people on your site. And these can be sliced and diced in 8 million different ways. In e-commerce, it's very common for sessions, as you see here in this sample set, to be higher than users. A lot of times when it's a larger ticket purchase or a longer sales cycle, they're going to be much closer together. On the right-hand side, you can see active users right now. It's exactly what it sounds like. Everyone has different metrics for this. I can tell you on one of the sites that I run, I check in here a few times a day just to make sure there's someone on the site right now that lets me sleep at night. What are they looking at? How are they flowing? It's a very, very granular view. It doesn't give you the macro level view that you ultimately want from Google Analytics, but it does help you sleep at night sometimes. On the left-hand side is your core navigation within GA. There's 5 main sets of reports in this version, which is called Universal Analytics. So there's the real-time reporting tool. That's people on your site right now. It'll give you a map. It'll give you a list of pages that they're on. You can see that someone in London is reading your About Us page while someone else is about to check out in Palm Beach, Florida. You can see your audience here, and diving into your audience, you can look at demographics, you can look at locations, you can look at devices, so you can see who you're attracting. Acquisition tells you a bit more about how you're attracting them. So this breaks down channels and sources of traffic and refers. Are you getting more traffic from email than you used to? Is there a link out there in the wild that's sending a lot of people to your site, right? Behavior is what they're doing on the site. So you have who they are, how they got there, and then what they're doing. Within behavior, you can break down individual pages and the way folks are flowing through your site. And then finally, conversions, again, looking at the paths people are taking and whether they're doing what you want them to do, fulfilling your goals on the website. So again, you could dive in there for as long as you want and slice and dice this as long as you want and create views till the cows come home. But this top line view that you're looking at right now, if all you want is, are people coming to my website and is it more than it used to be, this view fulfills that. But as you get deeper, it really speaks to, again, the user flow, the user experience, and you'll hear me say that word quite a bit here in the next half hour, and the type of content and how it's resonating. So Jeff, can you tell us a bit more about how a content team on the business side is using the data that you're able to get from this system to make smarter decisions?
Absolutely. So at a real high level, most business owners, they just want to know that what they're doing is working. They don't want to be wasting money. They don't want to be in the dark. And I think, the operative word here for analytics is on the left-hand side of the screen there, second from the bottom. It's behavior. This is showing you behavior. It's not showing you what people want. You have to deduce what people want based on their behavior. So analytics is showing you traffic, clicks, things like how much time people spend on a page on average, things like how many people leave the website after looking at just one page, how many people enter the website straight from a Google search. In other words, they're not coming to the home page and sort of finding their way in. They're just jumping to not a random page, but in a relevant page on the website directly from Google. And all of these behavioral, metrics, they help us deduce intent, what people want, what we think they want. So we'll look at all of that. Some of those metrics I just mentioned are very relevant to content, organic content that is. That means any page on the website. And what we want to see is, number one, are people finding it? So we want to make sure that the page is findable through Google. Somebody goes to Google, they Google something, we want them to find our page. And the metrics will tell us that. Second, we want to see that people are spending time on the page. We don't want to see, for instance, a page that has, let's say, 30 seconds or less of average time spent on it. Now, some pages like a contact us page, for instance, or a page that doesn't have a lot of information on it, that's okay if that doesn't have if people aren't spending time. But if it's a blog, or if it's a case study, or if it's the home page, or if it's a really, really important services page that's describing perhaps your main product or solution, we want people to spend time on that. We want to see, I would say, at least a minute. And if they are, well, then we know a few things. We know that the content is engaging enough to keep people reading it. We know that it's optimized for search. because people can find it. They're coming to it directly from Google. And then if it's a website that is optimized for conversions, in other words, the company wants leads, they want people filling out forms, they want contact information so they can reach out and try to sell them further. If we're getting those conversions, then we know that the offers that we have, or the overall message, it's compelling. It's forcing people to take action. So these are the kinds of things we look for whenever we're producing content for a client, and we look at them regularly. The everything I just talked about is kind of what you do in the beginning, but then probably the most important thing is you have to do it consistently, month to month. You need to benchmark at first, and then probably look at it as often as you can, but then in another month, in another 3 months, take a look and see if are things getting better or are they getting worse? Is traffic going up or is it going down? Are people still spending as much time on this new crop of blogs as they did on that first crop? So all of these things get factored in, and honestly, they help us continue the marketing life cycle, from strategy through execution to reporting. Because if you can't report on what you did, you won't really be able to evolve the strategy. So this is a very important piece of what we do, and it helps us kind of carve out a lane, a wide lane, but a lane for every client we work with. And really, this is true of any business. It helps you figure out the direction, verify that the direction you're going in is the correct one. And then over time, you can kind of narrow that lane and refine things. And that's where, some of these more sophisticated tools Adam has mentioned really come into play. I think the great thing about analytics and Google Ads is that they help anybody get up and running right away and make sure you're just going in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you. So that was a top line tour, very much a nickel tour of Google Ads and Google Analytics. Now, some of what I just showed you is going to change, and it's going to change relatively rapidly here. That's because the Googleverse is undergoing 3 pretty significant modifications here in 2021. Some are already in play, and some are coming here this summer, some are coming at the end of the year. So I'll start with the first. You might have heard of GA4 or Google Analytics 4. This is a new version of Google Analytics. Most new accounts are spun up in Google Analytics 4, and some folks are starting to convert what you saw on the previous slide, their universal analytics account, over to Google Analytics 4. I'll start by saying we don't recommend you do that tomorrow. There are some significant differences between the two. What Google is doing, number one, they're focusing on privacy. And then number two, they're focusing on flattening out the way they report on things. So what do I mean by that? Universal Analytics is focused, again, on hits, on events, but events you have to tell it to track as events. You have to code that in, and conversions. Those are the big ones. What Google Analytics 4 is doing is essentially calling everything an event. A page view is a type of event. Someone filling out a form is a type of event. Someone leaving a site is a type of event. And then it's focusing on a much more holistic and user-focused view of your performance. So this is driving some very technical users crazy, because it's doing some of the thinking for you in this new version. It's delivering a much more, again, holistic view on top line engagement and, frankly, how you're doing. So some of what Jeff just described, where a team like his is currently reading the tea leaves in the data to figure out, GA4's value proposition is it's going to give you a top line view of it and theoretically allow you to dive into the tea leaves if you want. There's some relatively substantial user interface changes coming with GA4. Likewise, there's some relatively substantial nomenclature changes. So things like source and medium, and if you're in Google Analytics a lot, you know exactly what those are. Those are hard, if not impossible to find. They've renamed them to other things and put them into different data schema. Now, I said before, I don't recommend that you dive over to GA4 today. The reason for that is, again, it's very, very different. If you have Google Analytics set up in any sophisticated way, you're going to have to reset it up in GA4. Now, it is okay to run the two in parallel for a while. Universal Analytics, as you probably have it now, and the new version. There's no sign that Universal is going away anytime in the near future. We haven't had any type of a sunset or a stop of support on it. Frankly, I would be surprised if it goes away again anytime in the near future, or even the longer term, because it is a very different way of thinking. What I intend to do myself, and what I think would be a good idea for the folks on this call to do, if you are the admin or you have access to the admin, is stand up a parallel version of it. You might like it better. Particularly if you're new to Google Analytics, I can be pretty sure you're going to like it better. It takes away some of the minutia that we've become so used to over the years, some of the ways of navigating that we've become so used to over the years, and gives, again, that holistic view. There's pluses and minuses to it, but know it's coming. Don't be scared of it, and don't feel like you're going to have to cut over tomorrow or anything like that. Now, the second big change, and this is potentially a really big one, is what's called page experience. So page experience is the latest Google algorithm shift. These happen several times a year. Some are big, some are little. You might have heard of Panda, you might have heard of Penguin. They recently have been calling them just core updates. So the December 2020 core update, for instance. This is essentially Google scoring your site differently in search. Jeff had noted that one of the goals for many marketers is to show up in more searches, to show up more often, to show up higher, to get more clicks from those people who are going and trying to find a solution or a product set like yours. Page experience is bringing in an entirely new set of factors called core web vitals. Now, we don't need to get too deep into the weeds about exactly what the core web vitals are, but they are newer versions of measurements of the speed of your site, of the interactivity of your site, how fast it's actually allowing a user to do what they want to do. And then finally, the user interface, of your site, particularly around shifting elements. I'm sure you've all been on a recipe site on your phone, an ad pops in at the last second and you click it by mistake. That's a shifting element. It's called cumulative layout shift, and that's bad. Now, what page experience is doing is, for the very first time, it's making those core web vitals what's called a ranking factor. They exist now and you can measure them now, but starting, frankly, yesterday and today, they're going to work their way into your rankings, those rankings as reflected by the traffic that you see in Google Analytics. It would be wholly unsurprising for a significant portion of the web in the next month and a half to 2 months to see their traffic go up significantly or down significantly because of page experience. Now, why would Google do that, right? Why would they shift all of these things around? The reason is user experience, right? Page experience, user experience. I promised I'd use the word experience a lot. Google is at its core a user experience company. Google makes a lot of money to the tune of tens of billions of dollars a year off search ads. It makes a lot of money off of search ads because it has a lot of users. There's a lot of users because it delivers good recommendations on the content that you should go look at. That, again, is reflected in Google Analytics on that site. Think of it like a restaurant recommendation. If I go and I ask Jeff where to eat today, and he says Swati Thai, across the street, and I go there and they're closed, I had a bad experience. I'm probably not going to ask Jeff for another recommendation. I had a bad time. If I go over to that Thai restaurant and have a delicious pad Thai, I'm pretty happy with that recommendation. I'm going to go back to Jeff and ask him again for another restaurant to go to. Google thinks the exact same way. So they are forcing sites now to be fast, to be interactive the way users want them to be, and to not shift elements around in a way that's confusing to a user. What can you do about it? Well, first, you can measure it. This is yet another Google tool called Lighthouse, is where you're able to get that, or you can get it in Search Console. We can follow up with this if you need to. You can certainly Google this as well. It's pretty prevalent on the web right now. but you're looking for a number of factors in there. But in both of those tools, if you have access to them, there's big blue ribbons that say Core Web Vitals. This is what they are. It's pretty simple. It's on a green, yellow, red spectrum. If you're green, you're probably good. You're delivering a good experience. If you're red, something is slow, something is shifting too much, and it's something that you might want to look at. That's where you will get your development team or your marketing team involved. But know that this is coming. It rolled out or is rolling out. We don't know exactly in June. It's expected that the web will be universally covered by it by the end of August. So when you do dive into your analytics after this, to play around, it's entirely possible that what you see in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months might look different. More traffic, hopefully, less traffic, maybe, because of page experience. And the last piece that's really going to affect things, and this is a hyperbolic statement that I have here, is the end of third-party cookies. An even more hyperbolic way is to speak about Google killing cookies, or a cookieless future. That's the term of art you're seeing a lot these days. That's not technically accurate. What Google is doing, again, as goes Google goes the web, is stopping native support for what are called third-party cookies in its Chrome browser, which has the largest market share here in the States, and I believe worldwide as well. Now, a cookie is a tiny text file that a website stores on your browser. If you think about logging into Amazon, you log in once, the next time you come back, you're automatically logged in. A cookie did that. Now, you can think about any other experience that you take on a site where your progress is saved. A cookie did that. But you can also think about the way ads work. Everyone on this call, I imagine, has gone to Amazon, has gone to Zappos, didn't buy that pair of shoes, left and went to a news site and saw an ad for that pair of shoes, 10% if you come back. That's a cookie. A cookie did that. So why does this matter? Well, third-party cookies are put there by a site that isn't the site you're on. It's coming from somewhere else. These fire a lot of ad networks. These work with some analytics networks. These can also do some relatively untoward things, right? These are a way for sites to sell user data without you knowing. You've been on this type of site, you might also like that one. You don't know that's happening. That's a privacy concern, right? That's a user experience. Again, Google, user experience company. That's a user experience concern. So that's not going to happen natively in Chrome anymore. And frankly, it probably won't happen at all in Chrome anymore. However, first-party cookies, which are placed by the site you're on, will still work. So we are not going to a cookieless world, and Google is not, quote unquote, killing cookies. They're doing away with third-party cookies. Now, I personally am not wildly concerned about this, and here's why. Google is doing this. They're essentially the biggest ad vendor in the world. If they were taking away all targeting, and they were taking away all ability to find users based on affinities and interests and intent, they'd cost themselves tens of billions of dollars. That's simply not going to happen. What's going to happen, however, is a reliance on first-party data, on getting people to your site. Again, organic search, factoring into page experience, measured by analytics. It's going to force you to work on the keywording, right, and the ad creative that Jeff noted before. You're going to need to get people to you so you can cookie them, so you can remarket to them, because it's not going to be quite as easy to go and buy that data anymore. This is coming over the course of this year. It's expected to be fully in effect by the end of 2021. Now, another reason I'm not wildly concerned about this, about 57% of third-party cookies are already blocked. Safari, which is a leading browser, and Firefox, another leading browser, they did this years ago. It just happens to be Google. But again, you're going to hear about it. It is a change that's going to affect the Googleverse. But the effect for us on this call is going to be reliance, again, on that story that analytics tells, and reliance on Google Ads to get in front of the folks that you want to speak to, because you won't have quite as many other options as before. So to start to wrap up here, let's talk about what this means for the life sciences, right? Number one, as I alluded to, we're going to have to go back to basics in a lot of ways. Over the course of the last 5 years, it's become very easy through things like Google Ads and more sophisticated networks to target folks. They've become blind to this. Cookies are blocked and a lot of ads are blocked. Everyone knows that their data is being sold and moved around behind the scenes. So this increased focus on privacy is going to force us to use tools in creative ways, in new ways, and frankly, in more effective ways. We're gonna have to understand our audience, not just throw ads at them through a data vendor, right? Not just throw ads at them through a programmatic platform. Again, that level above what Google Ads brings to the table. We're going to have to really get them. We're gonna have to look at what they're searching for. Again, back to Jeff, the keywording and the creative. We're going to have to work on placements in the places they are. We're going to have to know what they're reading, not because we're able to buy the data, but we're going to actually have to truly understand them. They're humans, they're not spreadsheets. With that, and Jeff, I'll ask you to comment here, we're going to have to tell some stories. We're going to have to stand out from the crowd. We're going to have to build our brands in very smart ways. And that can be relatively tough to very tough in a highly technical space. Right? We feel sometimes like we can't be creative, like we can't get that message across, but we're going to have to. So Jeff, I would ask you as the leader of a content team, how you do that in a space like this. These are some very, very complex companies I see here on the right side of my screen.
Yeah, great question. One we get all the time, and it actually has a very simple answer. It's just being very, very clear and defining some important things early on. As best as you can. The more detail you have, the clearer things become, the clearer they are for the people that visit your website. So mainly, we start with, we call it positioning, but really it just means what you do and who it's for. So you want to make sure you're being very clear about what it is you're selling or what it is you provide, be it a service, be it a platform, a model of some kind, paradigm, or whether it's a tangible thing, like it's actual software or hardware, and then who it's for, who's actually going to be using it, who benefits most from it, who's that, you might call it a target audience, but, just be clear about who it's for. And then from there, we move on to, okay, what do we say? We call it messaging, but we break down what is special about you, your brand, your company? What are your, we call them core attributes. Really, it's just, what are your strengths? What is, when people think about or when they encounter your brand, what do you leave them with? And then we look at also, Adam spoke to it earlier, but what makes you different? Differentiators. What are you faster? Are you safer? Are you easier to work with? Are you, do you save people money? Do you save them time? All of these things enable buyers to differentiate between options. And the better you can define your option, and the better you can make your option stand apart in a unique way, the more likely it is that people are going to leave your website and remember you, which is really the goal. And it's one of the hardest things to do in marketing. But that's really what we are trying to get at. We're trying to make things as clear, as concise as we can, so people will take the time to read it, make it as compelling and as differentiated as we can so that people will remember it. And stories are the best way to do that. There's a reason that stories are, kind of human currency. They're how people learned before we could read or write. And there's a reason for that. And that hasn't changed. Stories are still the best way to convey a point, an argument, a set of facts, some kind of information, whatever it is. You as a company, you are taking to market ultimately an argument. You're saying we do X, Y, or Z,
better than anybody else does. And here's why. And a story is the most efficient vehicle for making sure that message resonates and sticks, and make sure that people take it with them. And Google and its tools, its tool set, are kind of the other side of the coin. It's what enables us to fine tune that story, to position it right, and to confirm that that story is resonating and that we're telling it the right way, or that we're not, and we need to change things. But yeah, I think that's really how we approach story, and that's why stories matter, even in life sciences. Because the truth is, there's, in B2B, there's no such thing as selling to businesses. You're always just selling to people. You're always just communicating with people. And stories will always resonate with people.
Tremendous. Well, thank you for that. And then the last piece here in terms of what we need to take away, what we need to think about based on the tools at our disposal and what's coming is a focus on privacy and a focus on user experience. You've heard me say both of those terms a number of times here over the last 45 minutes. Every single one of those changes is about privacy. It's about the way data is handled. It's about the way data is shared. It's about transparency for the user. And it's about the user feeling trust in Google, in individual sites, and in the web as a whole. And it's about user experience. Again, back to the restaurant recommendation. Jeff gives me a bad recommendation, go to a restaurant that's closed. I'm not going to ask him again. Google gives a bad recommendation. They're going to go maybe try Bing, maybe try Yahoo, right? Go somewhere else for that. We need to deliver fantastic experiences for our users, for our customers, for our prospects. If we don't do that, we're not going to rank, right? We'll have to spend a lot more in Google Ads to get the same rankings that we would. So we can measure that in tools like Google Analytics, right? We can look at that and say, are people converting? Are we delivering the experience that we should? Are we telling the right story? Or are we not? So Google Ads, Google Analytics, both technical platforms, both ways of getting where you need to go, but ultimately both simply a means to an end. You can be the best technician in the world at either of them. You can spend hours, days, weeks getting certified, understanding what you need, and you're not necessarily going to be able to do it if you can't connect. So I saw an Andrew Preston just raised your hand. Would you like to weigh in or ask a question? Okay. And Alvin as well. Andrew, we are right at the end of the presentation piece, so you can go ahead and put any question that you have in the Q&A. Alvin, you can do the same, or if you'd like to chat, just ask over in the Q&A and I will turn your speaking abilities on. And likewise, if anyone else has any questions, comments, thoughts, or concerns, you can feel free to weigh in the Q&A box there, and we can either get to you now or take you offline and make sure you get what you need. It's a great question, Take. He asked there, how would the Google Ad strategy be different for a B2C product? So if it is truly a product, as in something tangible that you sell, their Google Shopping has become very, very attractive. It's right at the top. It's a learned and obvious behavior for people to click on that. They're adding features and functionality, for instance, the ability to note that you have fast and free shipping, or the exact time it takes to get there, or the fact that it's in stock, or how many that you have in stock. So again, you can power that through Google Ads, but Google Shopping is very, very powerful. The other piece that's very, very important in a B2C strategy is optimization on the landing page, or in the case of e-commerce for the store. You're going to have a lot of competition in the B2C space. Those clicks can be very expensive, but fortunately, it's relatively simple to understand your return on ad spend, or your ROAS. Again, we're nothing if not jargon people here in marketing. what you're looking for is 3-to-1 to 5-to-1 at a minimum. So that's if you're doing search or shopping, but you're really looking to optimize at all stages. You're going to have a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of people bidding versus in B2B. Oftentimes it's relatively rare that someone is going 1-to-1 with you in the same way. So I hope that answers your question. We can circle back again if we need to. So Andrew Preston here. Absolutely, no problem, Doc. In terms of building a baseline, what in your opinion is a good time frame to start to see trends with groups of e-commerce pages, such as in a product catalog? That is going to depend almost entirely on your volume. B2B e-commerce, if we're talking very high ticket item, for instance, we have a client who sells a $15,000 item online. Their one sale over the course of the week can completely blow up their trends. We're looking 6 months, a year for them. If it's a higher volume than that, you can sometimes get results in days. If it's a week, right, and it's pretty flat, or you see a drop on Saturday, drop on Sunday, huge uptick on Monday, I would compare that literally week over week. Once you start to see that it's coming together because you're selling enough that 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 sales isn't throwing everything off, you can start to feel comfortable with that. The other baseline is on conversion rate. I would point you to a company called Unbounce, Unbounce. They have done some really great studies on conversion rate over the years, analyzing literally millions of pages. So they break down industry by industry, sector by sector, typical conversion rates, high, low, and some of the factors that go into them. So their conversion rate optimization report really is top notch for that. And that way you can use other people's data in addition to your own. Okay. So I will make one last call for questions here. Again,
looks like there's a question in the chat box here from Patricia. So the question is, do you have any advice for training on storytelling? Great question. I think there's a lot of advice out there. What I spoke to was kind of how we break it down, what you could call the story, and define those building blocks. But I think even before that, probably a more practical thing that everybody can do is just start telling the story. So literally talk to people, and if they're willing to listen, explain what your business is, what's great about it, what might be interesting. And what you'll notice if you do it a few times is you start to say certain things first, you start to say certain things second, third, fourth, and so on. And the order in which you tell somebody that kind of informational hierarchy is very important. And we try to reflect that wherever we tell the story. So on a website is probably the place where we're going to be able to tell the full story, but also on sales collateral, any piece of content. We want to maintain that hierarchy. It's going to shift and change dependent upon the audience and what we're talking about, but often I tell we have a team of writers here, and one of the pieces of advice that I got when I was younger and that I always give them is write as if you are sitting across the table from somebody explaining it to them. And that's your first draft. And usually that's pretty close, and that's a really good way to communicate anything. Humans, we have evolved to be able to tell stories quite efficiently. So how you would do it in person speaking should inform how you do it in writing. But that would be my best advice. Just start telling it and see where you get.
Awesome. So we also have a question here from Don Alexander about the degree to which a Google search can be confirmatory, right? It's a search coming after the recommendation rather than looking for the recommendation. So Don, that ties into what we call search intent, right? And search intent is something that can ultimately and often be determined simply by what you see when you do a search. So let's say that we're assuming our prospects are looking for a specific type of product, or they're doing a specific search and we want to be there for that. The first thing that I personally do is I look for it on Google and I look at what shows up. Google, remember, is measuring the behavior of about 7 billion people, maybe closer to 5.5 billion people, doing 40,000 searches a second. It is the biggest data set in the world, bar none. It knows what people want, because the Faustian bargain of Google Analytics is the fact that Google also knows what people are doing on your site. So what we do to look for that type of intent is we simply Google it, right? If we find a certain term has a lot of academic responses, we know that Google sees that people want the academic response to it. If it has shopping responses, we know that people are using Google to go and buy it. So that all speaks to intent. Is there a way to tell what type of search it might be? And that's really it. We looked at a few. The big ones are informational and purchase intent. That's our nomenclature for that. Informational is they're researching something. Obviously, purchase intent means they want it right now. In a case where it's a purchase intent search and you're not selling it, you need to either rethink your strategy about how you're putting it out there, or you need to give them a way to buy it, because that's what Google knows people want to see. So I hope that answers that. We can certainly dive deeper if you like. And then Alvin asks here, thoughts about dynamic search ads with this challenge. Massive fan. Anything dynamic, anything personalized, so long as you're able to get the data first party or come up with the data yourself, you're going to be in good shape. Personalization is a massive trend on the web for a reason. Dynamic content is a massive trend on the web for a reason. Again, remember, user experience. We need to give them what they want when they want it. If we can deliver content that adjusts to user behavior or adjusts to their specific need or want, we have delivered a better experience. We are doing better. Better UX, better SEO, better UX, more conversions. People want good experiences. It's up to us to deliver them. Okay. Wonderful. All right, so we are just about at the top of the hour here. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So thank you all so much for attending. Certainly the folks who stuck around here till the bitter end. I hope this has been a neat experience for you. This is the kind of content that SAMPS produces every month. We have a blog, we have a newsletter, and we certainly have webinar content like this in addition to the conferences that will be back at some point. So I hope if you haven't checked out SAMPS or joined, you do over at samps.org. Otherwise, use that as a resource. We can answer questions about digital marketing, sales, and a whole lot of really cool stuff. So once more, thank you all. Thank you, Jeff. And Alvin, you are exactly right. Better UX, even offline. Yes, we need to deliver for our prospects, our clients, our customers, and our peers. So thank you. We will sign off, and I hope that you all enjoyed that.